Hi, my name is Jana Roschker. As always, I'm still Jana Roschker, and I'm still from Ljubljana University, sinologist, professor of sinology, specializing in Chinese philosophy. And this is a guest lecture for the Ruhr University of Bochum. And it will be delivered in the framework of a international PhD colloquium, which is taking place under the relatively broad theme of East Asians' conceptualizations of future. Thinking about future, and I will, of course, in my part, introduce some philosophical conceptions of future, deriving from East Asian, traditional East Asian discourses. And so I will, with the aim to maybe show some less known understandings of future today, present the later Mohist notion of future through a contrastive analysis or contrastive comparison with the theory of time, and particularly future, as can be found in the work of Saint Augustine of Hippo. Now, I will, in this contrastive analysis, I will apply a method which I call the method of sublation, and which I have been developing recently during the past few years. So when we hear the word sublation, of course, we always think about Hegel, but this method, although it is also a dialectical method, it has not much to do with the Hegelian model of dialectics, but more with the traditional Chinese model of dialectical development, which is based on correlative complementarity. So why sublation? Because the three meanings of that are part of that from which this word sublation is composed are very important for the methods I am using. As maybe some of you know, the term sublation is a neologism which was coined in order to translate Hegel's term Aufhebung, and Aufhebung has these three semantic connotations of eliminating, preserving, and arising to a higher level. So these three, and the translators didn't find in English any word that would also encompass these three meanings. So they went back to Latin and they found the word sublatio, which also comprised all these three connotations. So these three connotations are also as eliminating, preserving, and arising to a higher level, are also of utmost importance for this method I'm using here. So because some elements of the two comparata, comparata means the object of comparison. So in our case, this will be the later Mohist canon on the one hand, and St. Augustine's theory of time on the other. So the contrastive comparison, in this process of contrastive comparison, some elements of both comparata will be eliminated, some of them will be preserved, and some of them will be lifted, raised to arisen, or however, whatever, to a higher level. So this sublation method is applied it represents a process which is implemented in 8 distinct steps or phases. In the phase first, we formulate a relational research question which is of interest for us, a philosophical question which is of interest of us. In our case, it has to do something with future, right? Then, but it has to be relational. Because why? Because it is especially in transcultural comparisons, it is always very difficult to carry out direct comparisons of particular concepts, because concepts have a lot of have a multi-layered meaning, and they're very context bounded, and these contexts are of course changeable all the time. So most of the meanings of the two concepts we want to compare do not overlap. That's why it is difficult and problematic to implement comparisons of particular concepts. But if we establish a relation between two concepts in both comparata, this relation is a more stable and therefore a more reliable category for implementing comparisons. So this allows us to implement conceptual comparisons instead of comparing concepts. Okay, so the sublation phase 2. In this phase 2, we identify the similarities between the way how these two comparata are dealing with the research question we have posed. Then in the sublation phase 3, we look for differences, but not differences between the two comparata as such, but simply differences regarding the differences within these similarities we have identified in the second step. Then we proceed to the sublation phase 4. We take these differences we have just identified and try to link them to the referential frameworks into which these two comparata are embedded, because they are taken from philosophies of very different periods of time and very different linguistic environment and historical backgrounds and so on. These referential frameworks are normally quite different also. But this linkage between referential frameworks and differences will help us to identify insufficiencies in each of the comparata. Nothing is perfect, and so our comparata are also never perfect. So this is the sublation phase 5. Then in the 6th, we have identified insufficiencies in the phase 5. We have eliminated them because they are not constructive for clarifying or basic research question. So in the 6th phase, we try to establish a mutual complementarity on this basis between the two comparata, which means that we take the strengths, the constructive elements of both comparata which we have preserved, and try to use them for complementing the insufficiencies at one of the other. So then the next 7th phase is the sublation as a shift, because in these 6 phases of interaction between the comparata, there was a tension which has accumulated to quite a high level. This tension produces a creative shift, which is called then the sublative shift or sublation in the more narrow sense. And this sublation elevates our thinking to a higher level on which we can gain a new insight, a new idea, or a new theory. So let's proceed now with introducing the two comparata. First one is the later Mohist view on time, and we will, of course, particularly focus on future. The later Mohist was a school of logicians. The founder of the Mohist school was Moza or Modi. Moza means master Mo, and this is also the crucial work of the Mohist school. And there is a part of this Moza source, Moza book, which is called the later Mohist Canon. This is the part that was written by his disciples, and it is the most logical. It deals mostly with classical Chinese semantic logic. So how did they see time? They saw it. They expressed it by the character jiu, which expressed the etymological meaning is a kneeing person for a long time. So it expressed the notion of prolonged duration. And they defined time in this sense of dynamic continuity or prolonged duration as something that fills the gaps between different temporal periods. And then they also have differentiated between the empirical and transcendent time. So they said time can be either limited or unlimited. And of course, the time we can experience, the empirical time, is limited, and the unlimited time is transcendent because we cannot grasp it. We cannot really understand it or know it via our limited sensory organs. But the only unlimited time also has a structure of different temporal sequences. So they say that the flow of time is ordered and can be expressed in terms of before and after. These are the main two categories of the Mohist perception of time, but they also highlight very often that limited time can be experienced. They said if it is possible that something does not exist, but if it does exist, then it cannot be simply eliminated, and it can be experienced as such. Okay, so in the temporal sequences are interconnected in the Mohist view, so past and present with the future are interconnected. So they said, how do I come to the previous? Okay, is that okay? Yeah. So they say, viewing from the standpoint of what lies ahead, we describe something as forthcoming, qie. But from the standpoint of what lies behind us, we describe it as having already occurred. Yi Jing the Yi, for the sinologist among you. Moreover, even when something is on the verge of happening, it is still referred to as forthcoming. So near future is also future. They want to make this clear. And then past and present are factual reality. They say, if something was given, it is also given in the present moment and cannot be eliminated. But for them, future, however, is not factual. So this view also highlights that entities or events deemed imminent do not yet have existence in reality. And they describe this with two examples, namely, they say in the first example, Qie Jing, Fei Jing. We have seen this prefix Qie refers to the future actions, or or at least near future action. So being about to fall into a well is not the same as falling into a well. Or being about to go out is not the same as going out. So what is about to happen does not equal to happening. It does not happen. But then they make a very interesting shift by showing what the negation of such theoretical distinction, what kind of consequences does it has? Because then they said to prevent some from being about from falling into the well in the future, it prevents them from falling into the well. Or to prevent someone from being about to go out prevents them from going out. So this first pair of the sentences, which is in the left column, right, delineates the difference between potentiality and actuality, associating the latter, the actuality, directly with the realm, with the reality, while distinguishing the former from it. So in the future, to fall into the well, into the future does not mean to fall into the well, does not equal to falling into the well. But then they revealed it in the negative form. Both states equally relate to reality, even though only the second one materialized in actuality, right? So this marks a critical distinction from the first scenario. While the first sentence, the affirmative one, delineates a theoretical differentiation between potential and actual states, the second, the negative sentences, demonstrates that preventing the potential, something that is about to happen, so preventing the intervening into this potential state inherently prevents the actual state. So yeah, this interesting shift lies in the transition from a theoretical distinction to a practical outcome. Yeah, and the first sentence differentiates between the potential and actual phases, and this has a contemplative purpose, but the second sentence moves beyond reflection to action. It shows that it points to the importance of the human intervention into the time, and this shows somehow a pragmatic approach of the later Mohist to potential outcomes of the future and also of the future itself. So this position not only clarifies our ability to shape the future, which is in line with the general Mohist critique of fatalism and the comprehensive refutation of predestined fate. Moreover, it explicitly recognizes the existence of an autonomous and free subjectivity within classical and traditional Chinese philosophy, because it directly challenges this prevailing prejudice, which claims the contrary, that there was no notion of subjectivity in traditional Chinese thought, and they argue that because of that, because there is no subjectivity, there cannot be philosophy in Chinese tradition. So the Chinese have only developed thought, thinking, but not philosophy. And so the later Mohist views have, of course, among many other more complex discourses, have proven this prejudice to be a prejudice. Okay, So far, so good. And now let's turn to St. Augustine of Hippo. He was a bishop of Hippo, which is in today's North Africa. He lived in the 4th and 5th history, and he had a very, very important influence on the pre-modern and also then modern conceptualizations of the time. In Western philosophy, in European philosophy. So he was also important because of his theoretically clear integration of theology and philosophy, and which is then very characteristic for much of the Western thought. So his main works were Confessions and the City of God. So, and his theory of time, which is quite interesting for his age or for the period in which he wrote it, can be found mainly in Confessions, particularly in its book 11. So in this book this theory is quite interesting in his time because before him, the concept of time was largely shaped by the Aristotelian presumptions and Aristotle's view of time mainly as an external measurable quantity closely associated with physical movement and change. So in contrast to these views, Augustine understood time as a part of human inwardness also, and thus incorporated a more introspective and psychological dimension of time into the philosophical studies of his time, of his period. By emphasizing the human experience of time, then Augustine also paved the way for distinguishing between the empirical, namely scientific measurement of time, and the experiential, subjective feeling of time. And this had a lasting influence or impact on the further development of Western philosophy. So, but for him, of course, time was created by God from nothing. It was a part of creatio ex nihilo. And so people, without God's intervention, there would be no physical world as we know it, and nothing like time we experience it. So he wrote, for instance, there was therefore no time before you made anything. This you is, of course, refers to God, because the Confessions were written as a kind of dialogue between St. Augustine and God, and he refers to God as you. So since time itself is something you made, no time could be eternal along with you, since you are always there. And if time were always, it would not be time. So, but his creation of empirical time does not mean that he merely set its course in motion. No. Rather, God brought the entirety of temporality into the world at once, including past, present, and future. It is therefore completely pointless or redundant, even absurd, to ask about any form of time before this divine creation. So, again, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. And the empirical time for him is also divided into 3 categories: past, present, and future. So time is not only objective in the sense of the empirical time, but also a psychological construct of human mind. So, and this past, present, and future are also parts of this psychological construct. So he says, if nothing were passing away, there would be no past time. And if nothing were still coming, there would be no future time. And if nothing were passing, there would be no present time. But the thing is that all these temporal categories are connected to non-being. So he says, but what mode of existence can those first two times have, namely past and future, since the past is no longer and the future is not yet? And the third time, the present, if it were not passing away, would it not be the present? It would not be the present, but the eternal. But if the present is only a time because it is passing away, how can we say that it exists? Since the reason for its existing as time is that it will soon not be, which means we can only say it exists because it is on its way to non-existence, right? But, however, the present, although it is problematic because it has no extension and it is also of a transient nature. Now it is here and then it will not be here. It is not eternal, but it is only a stage between a non-existent past and the equally non-existent future. But still, in spite of this problematic nature, the present moment, the here and now, is still the only reality that we can experience. So he said, what should be clear and obvious by now is that we cannot properly say that the future or the past exist, or that there are three times past, present, and future, right? Perhaps we can say that there are three tenses, but that they are the present of the past, the present of the present, and the present of the future. So, yeah. So actually, the past no longer exists, and it lacks any tangible dimension. It has no extension also, but the future has yet to occur. But the present time is still although also without extension and also transient, but it is still the only moment in time that is real, and it can be experienced by our limited sense organs, by our limited capacities of our limited human body. It can be experienced through observation and through awareness, right? So, but now we shall begin with the contrastive analysis of these two different comparata, St. Augustine and the later Mohist Canon, with the method of sublation. So, as you might remember, the first step of the sublation method is a formulation of a relational research question, right? So we will, this research question should be of interest for us, and it should be relational, of course. And I must say that the method of sublation does not use, that does not work with the two comparata in a way that it would evaluate which one is better or which one addresses the question, the central question in a better way, or which one provides a better answer. But they are only mainly used as inspirations for our own philosophizing. So our research question will be the relationship. What is the kind of the relationship between reality and the future? What is the nature of this relationship. And the second step is that we shall identify some similarities between them, and as the, between the way how they address this question, the relation between future and reality. So we have seen that I have identified at least three crucial similarities between the two comparata in this respect. So they both distinguish between objective and subjective, transcendent and empirical time, suggesting a twofold understanding of time that accommodates both finite and infinite aspects of time. So they also both highlight in this context the importance of subjective experience in understanding time. Then the second similarity is that they both understand time as a continuum where past, present, and future, or before and after, are interrelated. And the third similarity is that they both understand the future as something that does not exist in factual reality, in actual present. And now let's take a look. These were just family resemblances. Let's look what is behind these apparent similarities, because as we have seen, as we will see, the distinctions that define these similarities are quite great, because both comparata, both philosophers arrive to this conclusion, which was expressed in similarities from very different approaches or very different viewpoints. So let's take a closer look upon these three similarities. The first one is, as we have seen, that both comparata distinguish between objective and subjective time, or transcendent and empirical time, right? But they are, as we will see, based on different assumptions by the two thinkers, so that the respective functions or implications of these seemingly similar assumptions are also different. The later Mohist, they, of course, also differentiate between this unlimited, limited, empirical, subjective, and so on, these two kinds of time, but they're not interested in the origin of this objective, unlimited time. Because they think this is not interesting at all, because they are interested in are active practices within immanent time. But for Augustine, it is the issue is completely different, because for him, objective infinite time is a creation of God. So empirical time is only factual presence, graspable through our awareness. So these two attitudes are quite different. So let's look to the second similarities. Both philosophers acknowledge the interrelation between different temporal categories, but in Mohist canon, past and present are real, whereas the future is not regarded as a part of real actions, states, or events. And in Augustine, it is like that past and future exist only in our mind, while the present is real. And now the third similarity: future does not exist in factual reality for either of the two comparatum. But in the Mohist canon, as we have seen, the future alone is devoid of factual existence, while past and present, they are actual, they are factual. In Augustine, both the future and the past lack actual being, lack actuality. So this is also a quite big difference that underlies their respective views, which are then formulated in an apparent similar way. So these differences can be now linked to the referential frameworks of the two philosophers, or of the two sources we are investigating. Of course, if we look at the referential framework into which Augustine's theory of time was embedded, it was, of course, a framework that is deeply rooted in Christian theology. So everything that exists does so because it participates in the essence of God. God's eternal nature exists outside of temporal divisions, and we as human beings are, of course, incapable of understanding this. But the objective nature of God's eternity can be linked to the subjective perception of human time through the observation, through the awareness of the present moment, and of course also through our devotion to the divine. So he writes about this many times. For instance, this is one of the quotations where he says, "I, however, have been disarticulated into time. I cannot put the times together in my mind. My very thoughts are shredded, my soul unstrung, till I flow together into you purified, to melt into the fires of your love." Okay, so now the later Mohists, they are not very much interested in love or issues like that. They're much more practical and also, as we shall see, utilitarian. So their understanding of time is very connected to the choices we will make, and these choices should be beneficial for us, either for us personal or for the government. So they also highlight the importance of immediate action, and they deny deterministic ideas about the future. So one of the main conflicts they have had with the Confucian school is that Confucius was the notion of Ming or Tianming, the decree of heaven, was very important for him and the whole Confucian school, and they were very against it. So one chapter in this Mozi is also titled Fei Ming, against the faith. So they had a strongly utilitarian approach to reality, and also, as we shall see, to time. Then methodologically speaking, they mainly applied analytical methods that were based primarily on the principles of the classical Chinese semantic logic, and that were defined by a quest for linguistic clarity. So this linguistic clarity was very important for them. And it additionally contributed to their central philosophical commitment to practicality. So this is somehow their main right their main goal. And now let's take a look to the sublation phase 5. We shall identify differences between these two comparata. Regarding Augustine's theory of time, he potentially undermines, through his attribution of all existence to a divine nature. With this, he potentially undermines human agency and demotivates efforts towards personal transformation and also social change. But on the other hand, the utilitarian focus of Mohism might overlook deeper existential and metaphysical questions about human existence and the broader universe. So, which is also essential for a comprehensive understanding of reality and or place into this reality, right? So now we shall proceed to the step of mutual complementarity. So we will try first to reconcile Augustine's notion of divine determination with the Mohist belief of human agency. So how can we do that? We can do that because in Mohist there are also elements that cannot be changed, right? These are the circumstances that and also conditions, of course, that define our lives, but also the factuality of present and past events. The emphasis on the importance of human agency is grounded in such a framework. The realm of agency is by no means completely free of determinism, and no action takes place in an empty space of boundless freedom. So even if these predetermined elements are not divine, they must not be divine. They must not have any supranational intentionality of their own. But they can be linked to Augustine's idea or elementary assumption of a world governed by laws and principles, also principles of normativity, of ethics. So, however, this is, of course, not a fusion of the basic assumption of the two philosophies, but a dynamic interaction between the two, determined by a principle of mutual complementarity, in which elements of freedom are constantly combined and interact with those of determined, unchangeable facticity. This balance can manifest itself in a worldview in which metaphysical complexity creates the conditions under which human action can transcend mere utilitarian purpose and gain a new dimension that can lead to meaningful effects. Such an enriched perspective could allow us to envision not only a more dynamic interplay between determinism and free will, but also a vibrant interplay between, for instance, liberty and ethical responsibility, and so on. So, but let's proceed to the sublation in the narrow sense. This is the sublative shift. It manifests itself in a something that is a product of a tension created by the contrasting interaction between the two views of time, future, and reality. And it has helped us to see time as both a psychological and also spiritual experience, to see this subjective time. Such a view can acknowledge the existence of a transcendent eternity, but at the same time understand human time as a practical paradigm that can significantly influence our daily human choices and also contribute to social change and creative transformation. So through this sublation in the strict sense, time itself acquires a metaphysical meaning similar to and also inseparable from the human, the meaning of human life. And this is the final step of our sublation process, which should manifest itself in a new idea, new insight, or perspective that addresses the problem formulated in the initial research question. Yeah, like, yeah, please. So as we know, we are accustomed to see time as something that is linearly structured somehow. There is a linear schema, a linear arrow, which is divided into past, which is followed by present, which again is followed by future. So the St. Augustine has already somehow in his conceptualization of time, he has already schematically depicted this kind of linear understanding of time. But of course, this linear conceptualization of time is not the only conceptualization of time we know. Because as we know, for instance, in the Chinese tradition, but also in many other traditions, I suppose, time can also be conceptualized in a cyclical way. This is especially clear when we study Lao Tzu and also some other Taoist classics. But the Mohist idea of time is different. It is neither linear nor is it cyclical. It is actually a binary conceptualization of time. Time and reality, future and reality are being binary understood as being in the binary relation between facts and possibilities. So present and past events or actions belong to the realm of facts, while all future actions or events belong to the realm of possibility. So what has happened or what is happening right now is a fact. What will be happening is a possibility. So here we have somehow a division between the actual states and potential states, similar to Aristotle, but with the difference that the Mohist canon has projected this binary division onto our understanding of time. So past and present states and events belong to factual reality, but the future exists as a never-ending potential that inspires and motivates, of course, human actions and decisions. So future for the Mohist thinkers is very tightly linked to human agenda, to human subjectivity. They see an image of the future as an open field of infinite possibilities. And we are also, I think, in the 21st century, people living in the neoliberal utilitarian world are also accustomed to see future in a very similar way as a sphere of unlimited possibilities that can be occupied and colonized by subjects living in an always insufficient present. So such a future is also part of such a scheme of time and reality that is inherent in the utilitarian character of instrumental rationality. So it is quite familiar to us who are living in today's globalized society, and which are bounded together by the principles of the same economic and thus also axiological or normative order, right? Or system, which is based on profit or on profit accumulation. It is precisely the connection with the metaphysical principles found, for instance, in St. Augustine's spiritual conception of time and reality that can give meaning somehow to this hymn and go beyond its basic framework. In such a view, the potentiality of the future unfolds to this hymn and goes beyond this basic framework. But it also, this potentiality of the future, it does not stop here at some useful outcomes, right? It also becomes important for us through the ethical maxims. So in an combination of Mohist and Augustine's assumptions, these maxims are, of course, no longer purely divine, which means that they are no longer necessarily universal and eternal and immutable, right? They must be therefore subjected to constant and continuous adaptation of the ever-changing reality. Such a new interaction between determinism and freedom, through which this living connection is defined, requires a responsible action based on ever-changing, but always, in every moment, valid principles of ethics and morality. Constantly adapting our decisions about future actions that can be consistent with such principles is one of the many important tasks on our human agenda. And even if its constant recreation is an eternally unfinished project, the view of the future proposed by the Mohist and enriched by the transcendent elements of St. Augustine could perhaps take us a step further. On what way on our path to understanding reality and time and future, and the relation between time and reality and future, and above all, our role in the relationships between them. So, and on this point, I will, of course, I will conclude my presentation, and I will thank all of you for your patient listening, and goodbye.